The wind on the coal that morning had a wrong shape to it. That was the first thing. Not the smell yet, not the tracks yet, not the pulse in the little handheld that would come later and change everything I thought I understood about the range. Just the wind, moving across the saddle at 11,200 feet, and going quiet in a place where it had never been quiet in the 11 years I had worked that mountain. I stopped walking. My crampons had that clean bite in the crust that tells you the freeze went deep overnight. And I remember I could hear the points sink and release, sink and release. And then I stopped and the sound stopped and there was nothing. No wind through the crumholts below, no jays, no the small dry rattle of last year's grass in the wind shelter I had built above the pass 3 summers back. Just my own breath, which at that altitude sounded louder than a person should sound. I want to tell you about that silence because it is the part I still hear at night, back down in the valley, in the room I sleep in when I sleep. The silence was not empty. It had weight, the way water has weight when you step into it above the knee. It pressed on my ears from the outside in. I stood there on the coal with my ice axe hanging from the leash, and I thought, something is wrong with the air today. That was all I let myself think. I had a route to check and a body of work behind me and a partner 3 switchbacks down. And I was not the sort of person who let a bad feeling stop a day's work. My knee was already talking to me a little, the way it does in cold. And I remember being more annoyed about the knee than the silence. That is a thing I want to be honest about. I was standing in the first moment of the worst day of my life, and what I was thinking about was whether I had brought the second brace. That was the mistake. Not the biggest one, but the first. My name does not matter to you, and it will not save you anything to know it. But you can call me Bern. Bern Aldana, 44 years old, snow ranger with the district for 11 years, and a trail crew hand for 6 years before that. I have done avalanche forecasting, backcountry rescue, 3 seasons of fire lookout relief when they were short bodies in the towers, and 1 long ugly winter working the compaction sled for the ski hill down in the valley when my knee gave out the first time and the district put me on light duty. My father was a hard rock miner for the copper outfit 2 ranges east, 31 years underground. My mother taught 4th grade in the town below this range and can still tell you the name of every child she thinks she failed to reach. I grew up looking up and being told by one parent to stay above the ground, and by the other to look each child in the face before you decide you have done your part. I say all of this so you understand that when I tell you the mountain went quiet, I'm not a person who is easily impressed by silence. I have been alone in a fire tower for 6 weeks at a stretch. I have skinned up a ridge in the dark at 4 in the morning with only my own breath for company. Silence is my job. But this was not that silence. This was the kind of quiet a room gets when someone has just stopped talking and is looking at you. I keyed the handheld on my chest strap. The button clicked. I said, "Tovar, you on?" Static. That was not strange by itself. The repeater on the shoulder of the range was old, and the coal was one of the shadow spots we knew about. What was strange was what came under the static. A low rise and fall in the noise floor, slow and even, like something breathing into a pillow. Not a voice, not a signal I recognized. Just a shape inside the hiss. I keyed off, waited, keyed on. Tovar. Static, and that shape under it, coming and going. I told myself it was the repeater. I told myself it was wind on a wire somewhere below. I made myself keep moving. The coal dropped east into a bowl I'd crossed maybe 200 times in my career. And today the bowl looked wrong, the way a face you know looks wrong when the person is sick and has not told you yet. The snow was the same, the rocks were the same. The little cornice on the north lip was the same size it had been a week ago when I flew the drone over it. But the color was off. There was a faint yellow cast to the light, and the shadows in the wind-scoured hollows were the wrong blue. And I could not tell you why then, and I still cannot tell you why now. I put a boot over the edge and started down. By the time I got to Tovar, he had stopped on a flat bench at 10,007 and was sitting on his pack drinking from his thermos with his back to the coal. He heard me coming and did not turn. "You hear that on the radio," he said. "I heard it. Been doing it for 20 minutes, since we left the cache." Tovar Ellenson was 31. My partner on the winter route worked for 2 seasons, a former ski patroller from a range 600 miles north of ours. He was not chatty. He was competent in the way I liked, which is to say he did the thing you needed him to do without needing to be told twice, and without needing to be told he had done it well. "Repeater," I said. It came out flat because I did not believe myself. "Sure." We drank water. We ate. I looked back up at the coal, and the wind still was not blowing through the crumholts, and the jays still were not there. And somewhere lower down toward the tree line, I heard a single crack that could have been a branch giving up under snow load, or could have been something else, and neither of us said anything about it. "Cell working," Tovar said. "No. Mine either. Not since the trailhead." I remember I nodded, and then I remember I did not want to nod again, because nodding felt like agreeing to something. We had walked in from the winter gate at 6 that morning. The truck had been alone in the lot. That was normal for a weekday in March before the through-hike season. But the gate itself, the little chain and lock we kept across the access road, had been open when we arrived. Not cut, not forced, just open, hanging from its post the way it does when a district hand forgets to close it after a plow pass. Except no district hand had been up that road in 8 days, according to the log I had signed the night before. I had closed the gate behind us and told myself someone had forgotten. And on the drive up, I had passed the diner where Tovar and I used to have breakfast on early mornings, and it had been closed, and the owner's handwriting on the door said, "Closed today, sorry." And I had told myself she had a cold. And on the last 3 miles of the access road, we had passed 2 sedans parked at pullouts, one with a rental sticker and one with plates from a state a long way from ours. And Tovar had made a joke about tourists, and I had laughed. 3 things. I had noticed all 3. I had done nothing about any of them. This is a thing I did that day, before the coal. I noticed, and I moved. We packed up and dropped another 500 feet toward the string of huts we maintained on the east flank. There were 3 of them, spaced along a traverse route that connected the district's high country to the old fire road below. Our job that week was route inspection, hut inventory, and a check on the seismic station that the university kept bolted to a rib of granite between the 2nd and 3rd huts. It was ordinary work. We had done it in worse weather. We had done it in better company. There was no reason for the weight in my chest by the time we reached the first hut, except that the wind still had not come back. And the radio still had that breathing under its static. And my own body was telling me something my mouth would not say. The first hut was a low A-frame, set into the lee of a boulder field, painted the flat red the district used for everything, so it would show against snow. The door was closed. The shutter over the window was latched. Nothing about it looked wrong from a distance. Up close, there was a print in the snow at the threshold. Not a boot print, not a paw, a knee print, if I had to name it. And beside it the wide, flat shape of a palm laid down with the fingers spread. And past that a drag mark going out toward the boulder field and disappearing between two rocks. Tovar looked at it and said, "Bern, I see it. That is not old. No. The freeze had gone hard overnight, and the wind had scoured the surface. And the print was crisp at its edges, the way a print is when it has been made in the last 2 hours. The palm was bare, no glove, which at that temperature meant the person who made it was either already dying or already past caring. I put my hand on the door of the hut, and it swung inward before I turned the latch. Inside, the hut smelled of iron and of the sweet chemical sharpness of a stove fuel canisters that is vented in the cold. The bunk was pulled away from the wall. The little wood stove was cold and had not been used in months. Ash from the fall crew still packed at the back of it. The floor between the door and the bunk had a smear across it, dark and dry, going from the threshold to the far corner and stopping under the window. Under the window there was a coat, folded the way you fold a coat when you are being neat about the last thing you will ever do. Tovar came in behind me and stopped. "Do not step in it," I said without turning. I crossed on the balls of my feet, checked the coat. The name tape was gone. The inside pocket held a set of keys, a folded topographic map of the range with a red line, traced along a route that did not connect to any of ours, and a small, hard object I did not recognize at first. When I lifted it out into the light from the door, I saw it was a pulse strobe, the kind that ice climbers clip to a harness for night rescue visibility. And it was on. Its diode blinking behind its plastic housing at a rate slower than I had ever seen one blink. Once every 4 or 5 seconds. Long, patient, deliberate. The strobe was warm. I put it back in the coat pocket. I do not know why. Some part of me did not want to be the one carrying it. On the little shelf above the bunk was the hut notebook the district kept for users to log their stays. There was a page torn out along the wire. Clean tear. Not panicked. The last entry before the torn page was mine, from 8 days earlier, in my own handwriting. The entries after the torn page were 3. A party of 2 who had left a can of soup that was not on the shelf, a solo hiker with the initials HB, and then 2 words in a hand I did not know, pressed hard enough into the paper to show through 3 pages under it. It said, "Do not, period, nothing after." I closed the notebook. I put it back on the shelf. I did not tell Tovar about it. I have thought about that a long time since, and I'm not sure why I did not. Maybe because he was already coughing a little by then, though he was hiding it. Maybe because I did not want to look at those 2 words for longer than I already had. Outside, the wind still had not come back. The drag mark led between the boulders, and I did not follow it. I told Tovar we were going to the second hut, and then to the seismic station, and then we would talk about what we had seen. He said, "We should call this in." I keyed the handheld. Static. That shape underneath, breathing. I keyed the district frequency. Static. I keyed the emergency band that we were supposed to reserve for lost persons and injuries, and never for anything less. I said the district code and my number and asked for a check. Nothing answered. But under the nothing, the shape got louder for a moment, and then softer, and then louder again. And I understood with the small, clean shock of a hand touching a hot pan that it was matching my breath. The rise came on my inhale. The fall came on my exhale. Not exactly, not perfectly, but close enough that when I held my breath, the shape held too. And when I let go, it let go. I switched the handheld off and clipped it back to my strap. "Repeater," Tovar said. It was not a question anymore. It was a request. "Yeah," I said. "Repeater." We went on. The second hut was empty and clean and smelled of nothing. That was almost worse than the first. The route between the two huts crossed a bench of wind slab that I had flagged as unstable in my report the week before, and we roped up short and moved across it one at a time. And while Tovar was crossing, I stood on the safe side of the anchor, and I looked back up toward the coal, and I saw, high on the shoulder above us, a shape. A person, I thought, standing. I got the binoculars out slow so as not to lose the spot, and I glassed the ridge, and there was nothing there. Rock, snow, the pale sky. I glassed again. Further left, further right. Nothing. I lowered the binoculars and looked with my bare eyes, and the shape was there again, in the same place, and it was not moving. I told myself it was a rock cairn I had never noticed. It was not. I knew every cairn on that ridge. I had built 2 of them myself. I did not tell Tovar. He came off the slab, and I clipped him in. And we kept moving, and I looked back 3 more times before we dropped into the trees. And each time the shape was there, and each time when I put the binoculars on it, it was not. By the time we reached the Seismic Station, the sun was past noon, and the light had gone flat, and the yellow cast in it had deepened. The station was a squat concrete box the university had poured into a granite shelf and roofed with a sheet of steel. There was a padlock on the door that we had the combination for. Tovar spun the dial and lifted the lock free and pushed the door open and stepped back to let me go in first, because he was polite that way, and I have thought about that small gesture more times than I can count. Inside, the station's rack of instruments was blinking normally along the top row and abnormally along the bottom. The bottom row was the seismographs, 3 of them, 1 for each axis, and all 3 of them were drawing a slow, even sine wave onto their paper drums. Not a spike, not the ragged fingerprint of a tremor, a sine wave, a clean one, rising and falling at a rate I had already learned that morning, without knowing it, from my own radio. Tovar looked at the drums for a long time. "That is not an earthquake," he said finally. "No. That is a signal." "Yeah. From what?" I did not answer, because I did not have an answer. And because the honest thing to say was that the sine wave on the drum, and the shape under my radio static and my own breath on the coal were all the same thing. And I was not ready to say that out loud yet. There was a phone in the station, a landline the university had run in on a buried cable that came up the fire road from the valley. It had a handset the color of old teeth and a cord that curled the way old cords do. I picked it up. There was a dial tone. It sounded wrong the way everything sounded wrong that day. Thinner than a dial tone ought to sound. But it was there. I dialed the district office. It rang 4 times and someone picked up and did not speak. "This is Aldana," I said. "Station 3. We have a situation up here. I need you to route me to the sheriff and to the university seismology desk, and I need you to do it now." Breathing. Not static this time. Breathing. Slow, even. Patient in the same way the strobe in the coat had been patient. I hung up. Tovar was watching me. He had not moved from the doorway. "Who was that?" he said. "Nobody. Line's bad." He looked at me the way a partner looks at you when he knows you are lying to him for a reason he is going to respect for another hour and then not respect anymore. "Bern," he said, "we need to go down." "I know." "Now." "I know." We closed the station. Tovar spun the lock and I watched his hands, and they were not shaking, which meant either he was steadier than me or he was hiding it better. And it does not matter now which was true, because both of us were about to be tested past the point where steadiness helps. We turned to go back up the traverse to the huts and the coal and the truck and the gate, and that is when we saw the second person. He was standing at the edge of the tree line below the station, about 200 yards down the fire road, in a red parka the same color as the huts. He was not moving. He was facing us. His hood was up, and I could not see his face. His arms hung down beside him with the palms open toward us, the way a person's arms hang when he has forgotten his hands are there. Tovar lifted a hand to wave. I caught his wrist before it got above his shoulder. The person in the parka tilted his head. Not the whole body, just the head, sideways, the way a bird tilts to look at something it does not understand. He held it there. He did not straighten it. I said, without moving my mouth much, "Back inside." We backed into the station. I pulled the door closed. Tovar spun the lock from the inside, which was a thing you could do on that door because the university engineers had built it that way for exactly the reason we were doing it now. And we stood in the dim of the concrete room and listened. There were no footsteps, not right away. The seismographs kept drawing their sine wave. Rise, fall, rise, fall. After maybe 2 minutes, I heard a boot on gravel. One, then another, slow, coming up the fire road toward us. Not running, not hesitating. Coming at a pace a person sets when he knows exactly how long he has and is not worried about arriving late. Tovar said, very quietly, "Bern, what is that?" "I do not know." "Is that a person?" "I do not know." The boots came up the fire road and stopped at the door. There was a pause. There was no knock. There was, instead, a sound I have tried and failed to describe in every statement I have given since. It was the sound of something pressing its face against the steel door and breathing through its mouth. Slow, even, in the same rhythm as the sine wave on the drum, in the same rhythm as the shape under the radio static, in the same rhythm my own chest had settled into without my permission. Then, once, something on the other side of the door said a word. It said my name. Not the way a person calls out, the way a person tries a word they have just been given, to see if it fits. Bern. One syllable, uninflected, then quiet. Tovar looked at me, and the look on his face is a thing I will not describe, because it belongs to him. "That is not somebody who knows you," he whispered. "No. That is somebody who was told." "Yes." We stood there and did not move. After a minute, the boots went away down the fire road again. We waited a long time, long enough that my legs went numb from standing, and the light through the little slit of a window over the door had shifted a full hand's width across the far wall. Long enough that Tovar sat down on the concrete floor and put his head between his knees, and I could hear him counting his own breaths out loud to keep them from matching the sound on the drum. I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, "We are going to be all right." I did not believe it. I said it anyway. Some lies you owe your partner. When I judged it had been long enough, I went to the door, and I put my ear against it, and I heard nothing. I unlocked it, I opened it a hand's width. The fire road was empty. The tree line was empty. The sky had that flat yellow in it still, and the wind had still not come back. I stepped out. Tovar came behind me. We locked the station, and we went. Not up the way we had come, because I did not want to cross the wind slab again with what I had seen on the ridge, but down the fire road, which is a slower route to the truck, but a safer one on paper. And I told myself, paper was still worth something. We had gone maybe half a mile when Tovar coughed. Not a bad cough. A small, dry one, the kind you get from cold air on a long day. He waved it off when I looked. We kept walking. 10 minutes later, he coughed again, and this time he stopped and put a glove to his mouth, and when he took the glove away, there was a dark spot on the palm. I stopped him. I took the glove. I looked at it. "Bit tongue," he said, on that last step down. "Show me your tongue. Bern, show me." He showed me. His tongue was fine. We stood there on the fire road with the trees close on both sides and the flat yellow light coming through them, and I felt the shape of the day change under me, the way a snow bridge changes under you the moment before it goes. "Tovar," I said, "when did the cough start?" "Just now. Before now." He looked at me. He was a good partner and a bad liar, and he did not try. "On the coal," he said. "A little. It was not anything." "Any headache?" "A little." "Chest?" "A little." I made him sit down on his pack. I made him drink water. I made him breathe deliberately, out of rhythm with anything. In a fast pattern I set with my hand tapping his knee. And he did it. And after a minute, the cough came back, and he put his glove up again, and there was more on it this time. I keyed the handheld. Static, that shape. Louder now, I thought, or maybe I only thought it because I was listening for it. I turned the handheld off. "How long have you known?" I said. "I did not know. I do not know now. Bern, I just have a cough." "Yeah," I said. "Okay." But I was already thinking about the coat in the first hut, and the drag mark going out into the boulder field. And I was thinking about the pulse strobe that had been warm in my hand. And I was thinking about the way the head had tilted on the person by the tree line. And I was thinking about the sine wave on the drum, and about my own breath matching it without my permission on the coal. And I was thinking about the voice at the door, saying my name like a word it had just been handed. And I was thinking very clearly that I did not know what any of it was, but that I knew where it was coming from. It was coming from above us, from further up the range, from somewhere past the coal, past the third hut, past the last of our route, up into the high cirques that we did not maintain because nobody had reason to go there in winter, and the summer through hikers went around them on the marked line, up where the old survey markers were and where the wind and the rock and the ice made their own weather, up where whatever was breathing in the radio and drawing sine waves on the drum was doing whatever it was doing. I did not want to go up there. I wanted to go down. I wanted to put Tovar in the truck and drive to the valley and hand him to a hospital and hand myself to a sheriff and let people whose job it was to know what to do with what we had seen take it from us. That is what any sane person would have wanted. That is what I wanted. But the district office had breathed at me on a landline that was supposed to be shielded by 2 miles of buried copper. And the emergency band had breathed at me from a repeater that had no business breathing. And Tovar was coughing blood onto a glove on a fire road at 10,000 feet in a range where I'd been the responsible adult for 11 years. And the only place any of this was resolvable was up. Because whatever was down was already down. Whatever was above us was still up there. I sat with him a long time. I gave him my second water bottle. I ate a bar and made him eat one. And he ate half of it and gave me the rest back. "Bern," he said, "you are going to leave me here." "No." "You are. It is the right thing." "No. I will go slow down the road. I will make the truck. If I do not make the truck, I will make the gate. If I do not make the gate, I will make the culvert where we sat in June. You know the culvert? Tovar. You go up," he said. "That is what you are thinking. You go up and find where it is coming from. And I go down. And if you find it and it can be stopped, you stop it. And if I make the valley, I tell them. And if neither of those things happens, then at least one of us was moving in the right direction." He said it like it was a route plan, like we were talking about who takes the north side of a search grid. He said it in the voice he used when he was scared and did not want me to know, which was the same voice he used when he was not scared. And that was one of the things I had loved about working with him. I said, "I am not leaving you on a road. You are not leaving me. I am walking. If I stop walking, I will get in the culvert and I will wait. You come back for me by dark. You do not come back by dark. I walk out on my own." I looked at him. He was already gray around the mouth. He was going to make the truck, or he was not going to make the truck. And there was nothing my staying with him would change about which of those it was. There was one thing my going up could change. I said, "Take the flare. Take both flares. Take my second handheld. Do not turn it on. Do not turn it on for any reason unless you can see the road out and you need to bring somebody in from the valley to you. Do you hear me?" "Yes." "Do not listen to the radio. If you turn it on to call for help, key it. Say what you need to say. Key off. Do not listen to the space between. Do you hear me?" He looked at me for a long moment then. His eyes were still clear. Whatever the cough was, it was slow. And there was a chance that meant we had time. Or it was fast and gentle at the front, the way some things are. And I would not know until later which. "I hear you," he said. I gave him the second handheld. I gave him the flares. I gave him the last of my water because he was going down, and I could melt snow with the stove, and he could not stop to melt snow. I gave him my glove liners because his had blood on the palm, and I did not want him touching his own face with that glove. I put my hand on the back of his neck for a second, the way my father used to put his hand on the back of my neck when he had something to say that he was not going to say. And then I turned and I started back up the fire road toward the traverse. I did not look back until I reached the switchback. When I looked back, he was already moving, downhill, at the slow, steady pace of a man who was walking his own body home. I never saw him alive again. The call on the way back up was worse. The wind still had not returned. The yellow light had thickened into something almost orange, though the sun was still white above it, and I could feel the shape under the radio, even with the radio off, in the base of my skull, a slow pressure that came and went in time with a rhythm that was not mine. I skipped the first hut. I did not want to look at the code again. I stopped at the second hut anyway, though I had told myself I would not. And I opened the notebook, and I read the 2 words one more time in the hand I did not know. And I closed the notebook, and I latched the door behind me. I do not know what I was hoping. Maybe that in the hour since I had last seen the words, they would have changed. They had not. I crossed above the wind slab this time, on the rocky rib the summer route used. And I moved without a rope because there was no one to catch me if I fell, and, old tool, no reason to pretend otherwise. The rib was bare where the wind had scoured it and iced where it had not, and I front-pointed up the icy sections with the axe planted high and my breath coming hard enough that my knee stopped talking and started shouting, and I told the knee it could shout on its own time, and I kept going. At the top of the rib, I came out onto the shoulder of the range, above the coal, into terrain I had not been in since a search for a lost climber 4 years back. It was a broad snowfield sloping up toward a cirque wall, and above the cirque wall was the summit ridge. And somewhere along that ridge, I knew from the map and from the strange line the coat had traced in red, was the old survey benchmark the state had set in 1953 and abandoned in 1971 when they decided the range was not worth the trouble. The line on the coat's map had ended at the benchmark. I did not know why. I had a guess. I did not like the guess. The guess was that whoever had made the drag mark out of the hut had been trying to get to the benchmark and had failed, and that the person at the tree line had already come from the benchmark, and that whatever was breathing was doing so from the benchmark, and that going to the benchmark was the last thing any sensible person would do. I went to the benchmark. The snowfield took me 2 hours. The light kept thickening. Halfway across it, I found tracks that were not mine. They came down the snowfield from above, from the direction I was going, and they went past me toward the coal. Bare feet in March, at 11,000 feet. The prints had gone in when the crust had been soft, sometime midday, and the toes had spread in the snow the way toes spread when they were gripping. The stride was too long for a person walking. It was the stride of a person moving at a pace that on flat ground would be a run. There was no sign of them slowing down. There was no sign of them stopping. They had gone down the snowfield toward the coal at a run, on bare feet in March, and had kept going and were now somewhere between here and the huts, or here and the fire road, or here and Tovar. I stood over the tracks for a long time. Then I kept going. There was nothing I could do about a set of tracks going the other way. That was the thing I told myself. It was true. It was also the kind of true you use to keep walking. By the time I reached the base of the cirque wall, the yellow had gone almost brown at the edges of the sky. And above me, the ridge line stood out against it black and clean. And along the ridge line, at intervals, were shapes I could not resolve. I got out the binoculars. There were people on the ridge, or things that had been people, standing at intervals of maybe 50 yards, facing outward from the ridge in different directions, motionless. I counted 11 of them before I lowered the glasses because counting more would have made me sit down and not get up. They were not looking at me. They were looking away from the ridge, out across the range, in every direction. And I understood then, in a way I still do not have a good word for, that they were not watching for something. They were being something. They were the shape. They were spaced along the ridge, the way antennas are spaced along a broadcast array. And whatever was pulsing through them. And the sine wave on the drum, and the breath on the radio, and the slow, patient blink of the strobe in the coat, and the tilt of the head at the tree line, and the bare tracks in the snow were all the same phenomenon. Distributed. I sat down in the snow. I ate the last of my bar. I drank water I had melted an hour before on the stove and had gone tepid in the bottle. I made myself think. The benchmark was on the ridge, about a quarter-mile east of the cirque head wall, in a gap between two of the shapes. I could see the little bronze cap of it from where I sat, catching a dull glint of that brown light. I could get to it. The route was steep but not technical for someone who knew where to put a foot, and the shapes on the ridge were not moving. And if they did not move, I could pass between two of them and reach the cap and see what was there. If they did move, I would not reach anything ever again. My father spent 31 years underground and had a saying about cut rock. He said any hole in stone that has square corners was made by somebody who wanted to come back to it. Round holes are water and time. Square holes are men. I thought about that, sitting in the snow at the base of that cirque, looking up at a ridge of standing shapes, and knowing there was a cut chamber somewhere in the granite ahead of me. I thought, whoever cut it wanted to come back. I thought, whoever came back is up there now. I stood up and I climbed. The traverse under the ridge was hard-packed, and I moved quickly on it, keeping my head low, keeping my eyes on my feet, refusing to look up at the shapes above me. I could feel them. I do not mean I felt watched, because they were not watching. I mean, I felt them the way you feel a fluorescent light in a room after the bulb has gone out, and you cannot tell yet whether the buzz you are hearing is memory or the next bulb starting to fail. I reached the gap between two of them. I did not look at either. I climbed the last 30 feet of loose rock and hard snow on my hands and knees, axe planted, points kicked, breath held in short bursts so I could hear if either of them turned. Neither did. I came up over the lip of the ridge, into the wind that had not been blowing anywhere else all day. And here it was, thin and cold and steady. And I understood that the shapes were standing in a stillness they were making, and that the wind existed outside their stillness, and always had. The benchmark was 10 feet from me. Bronze cap, weathered green at the edges, set into a boulder that had been drilled and grouted 3/4 of a century ago by people whose names were stamped into the metal in letters worn almost smooth. Next to the benchmark was a hole. Not a natural hole, a cut. A neat rectangle in the rock, maybe 2 feet on a side, edges square, going down into the boulder further than the boulder should have been able to go. And out of the hole came a soft sound and a soft light. The sound was the breathing. The light was a slow pulse, the color of an old television left on in another room. I lay down on my belly, and I crawled the last of it. I put my face over the edge of the hole. Down inside, maybe 6 feet down, was a chamber. It had been cut into the granite. The walls were smooth in a way granite does not go by itself. In the center of the chamber was an object I've described in every statement since as a metal box the size of a footlocker. Because that is what it most resembled, and because I do not want to describe the parts of it that did not resemble that. It was matte. It was seamed. It had no visible lights on its surface, but the pulse was coming from it, from all of it at once, the way a fever comes from a body. And in front of it, kneeling with its back to me, was a person. I could see the shoulders, the parka, the bare hands laid palm down on the cut floor of the chamber, the way you lay your palms down when you are asking something for permission and are prepared to be refused. The head was down. I could not see the face. I did not speak. I do not know what I would have said. I lay there and I watched, and after a long moment the person in the chamber lifted their head, slowly, and turned it toward the opening and looked up at me. It was a woman, middle-aged, weather in her face, the kind of weather that comes from work, outside, not leisure outside. She was pale but not gray. Her eyes were clear. She saw me. She was a person. She was still a person. "You should not have come up here," she said. Her voice was ordinary, tired, human. "I know. Are you the ranger?" Yes. She nodded, as if she had been expecting a ranger, and I was the one who had arrived, and now we could get on with it. My name is Inez Barquero, she said. I am, or I was, a research geologist with the university. I need you to listen to me because I do not have very long, and neither do you. I listened. That, she said, and did not gesture at the object because she did not need to, was here before us, before the survey, before the mine, before the people the mine displaced. I do not know how long. My guess is a very long time. It was quiet. It was quiet for as long as anyone paid attention, which was not long, because nobody has any reason to come up to this benchmark in winter, and in summer, the wind up here is loud enough to hide it. 3 weeks ago, it stopped being quiet. Stopped how? It started to pulse, slowly, once every 4 or 5 seconds. I've been monitoring it from the Seismic Station until 8 days ago, when I could not go back to the station because the people it was calling started to arrive. Calling. That is the wrong word. I do not have the right word. It is not calling. It is not broadcasting. It is doing something to the low bands, and to anything with a diaphragm, and to anything with a nervous system. And the effect on people is that some of them come to it, and some of them get sick, and some of them do both. My colleague Culvert came to it first. He is on the ridge now. He is the third from the west end. I could show you which one, but I do not want you to look at him for long. He is also my brother, if that matters. It does not really matter. I did not know what to say to that. I said nothing. You are not sick, she said, instead of waiting for me. I am not. My partner is, I said. He is on the fire road. He was coughing blood by the time I left him. And there are bare tracks in the snow between here and the coal going down. She looked at me and she was sorry. It was a real sorriness, quick and complete. And then it was gone because she did not have time for it. Your partner will not make the valley, she said. I am telling you that so you do not spend your last useful hours thinking he might. He may make the truck. He may make the gate. Do not go back for him. He will not be your partner anymore by the time you reach him. And the bare tracks are one of the ones I have not managed to keep down here. There will be more of them soon. There is a limit to what I can do from a floor. Then what? I said. Then what am I doing here? You are here because I need someone above ground who has seen this thing pulse and has not gone to it. You are here because I have been trying for 11 days to get a signal to the valley through anything that will not be corrupted by what this thing does to a signal. And every attempt I have made has either failed or brought more people up the mountain. You are here because your radios do not work, but your legs do. You want me to go down. I want you to go down, and I want you not to speak to anyone on any electronic device between here and the valley. And I want you to walk into the sheriff's office, and I want you to describe this place to a person who is looking at your face while you describe it. And I want you to tell them that they must cut the power to the repeater on the shoulder of the range and to the buried line that comes up to the station and to the cell tower on the highway pass, all three, because the pulse rides those and every hour they stay live is another mile of valley it reaches into. And you? I am staying. Why? She smiled a little. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a person who has already made peace with a decision and is being asked to explain it to someone who has not. Because it is not just a source, she said. It is a lock, and a lock has to be held closed by something. Something with hands and with weight and with a nervous system it can push against. If I get up from this floor, if I take my palms off this stone, the pulse gets stronger. I have tested it. Not for long. Long enough. You are holding it down. I am holding it down enough that it is not finished doing whatever it started doing 3 weeks ago. I do not know how long I can. I do not know if what I am doing is making any real difference, or if it is a story I'm telling myself so I can stay sane down here. But there is nobody else in this hole, and there is not going to be. And if I leave, the ones on the ridge will not be the only ones for long. There will be more. Some of them will come from the valley. I lay there, and I looked down at her, and I understood that she had chosen this, and that she was asking me to leave her in it. And I understood that the sane thing to do was to reach down into the hole and pull her out and drag her off the ridge and let whatever happened happen, because at least it would be the two of us happening together and not one of us alone. I understood that, and I did not do it. I said, "What is your name again?" "Inés Barquero." "Inés, if I get to the valley, if they cut the power, what happens to you?" "I do not know." "Guess." "If they cut the power fast enough, the pulse cannot ride out and it stays local. The ones on the ridge stop being useful to it. I think they die then. I think I die then too, but I do not know that. And if I am wrong, I will walk down in a week and find you and buy you a coffee, and we will laugh about this. Do not wait for the coffee. And if they do not cut it fast enough, then the range starts to be a bigger problem than the range. And I keep holding this down as long as I can. And after that it is not my problem anymore. Because I'm not here." I nodded. I could not think of anything else to do with my head. I asked her, because I had to ask her, "Is there anything I can do for you before I go?" She thought about it. She was a person who thought about a question before answering it, even now. And I remember thinking that if I lived, I would try to be more like that. "Close the hole," she said. "What?" "There is a steel plate under the snow beside the benchmark. The survey team set it there in the 70s when they closed the shaft. It is heavy. You can drag it? Drag it over the hole. Not to trap me, to muffle the pulse. It will help. A little. It will buy you time on your walk down." I looked. There was a rectangle in the snow where a flat thing had been buried. I dug it out with my axe. It was heavier than she said it would be, and colder, and it had a benchmark of its own stamped into it that no one had ever meant to be seen again. I dragged it toward the hole. Before I said it, I said, "Inés." "Yes." "If they ask me, down there, if they ask me why I left you, tell them I told you to. Tell them I said please." "Did you say please?" "Please," she said. I set the plate. The pulse from the hole did not stop when the plate went on. It went softer. It went softer the way a light goes softer when you close a door on it. And the door is not soundproof, but it is thick, and it helps. The light stopped coming up around the edges. The breathing stopped being audible over the wind, which had finally, on that ridge, been allowed to blow. I stood up. I looked west along the ridge. The shapes were still standing where they had been standing. None of them had turned toward me. I walked back to the gap between the two nearest ones. I looked once at the one on the west side. I looked long enough to know his face. I had seen it before. Not well. At a public meeting once, maybe, or at the diner. A face that belonged to the valley. Not a name I could give you now, if you asked. I looked away. I went through the gap. I told myself, on the traverse down, that I would go to the sheriff, and I would say I'd seen a face I knew, and they would find out from the missing persons list whose face it was. And I would go to the family and I would tell them. That was what I told myself on the traverse down. It was not what I did in the valley. I will get to that. At the top of the traverse down, I did look back once at the plate over the hole, and I said out loud, into the wind, "I am sorry, Inez." And the wind took it, and I went down the traverse and off the shoulder and back onto the snowfield and down through the cirque, and by the time I reached the call, the light was going gray, real gray, the honest gray of an evening at altitude, and the yellow was gone. I did not go past the huts. I dropped south off the coal onto a shortcut I knew, a couloir the summer route did not use because it was too steep to be pleasant and too rocky to be safe. And I glissaded most of it on my rear, with the axe planted in front of me as a brake, and I lost skin off both palms through my gloves, and I did not care. My knee gave once, halfway down, hard enough that I bit through my lower lip. I kept the axe planted, and I kept going. I came out at the bottom into the drainage that fed the fire road 1/2 mile above the culvert Tovar had told me about. And I told myself I would not look in the culvert, and I looked in the culvert. He was in it. He was sitting up, back against the far wall of the corrugated steel, hands in his lap, hood up. My glove liners were on the ground beside him. The second handheld I had given him was on the ground on the other side, off, exactly where I had told him to keep it. His eyes were open. He looked at me. I said his name. He tilted his head, not the whole body, just the head, sideways, like a bird tilting to look at a thing it does not understand. Then he said my name, in his voice, the way Tovar said my name, the exact way, with the little rise at the end he always used when he was about to make a bad joke. And under the sound of his voice, under the rise, was the other rhythm, the breath. I want to say something honest here. I stood in the mouth of that culvert, and I heard my partner say my name, and for one full second, I almost went to him, not because I thought he was still Tovar. I knew he was not, because a person's voice in your ear, saying your name in the way they said it, is a thing your body answers to before your mind gets a vote. My foot moved forward. I put a hand out. I said, "Tovar." I said it once. Then I made myself back out of the culvert. I walked backward. I did not run. I got to the truck, and I got in, and I did not lock the doors because I did not want to hear the click, and I sat there, with my hand on the key, for a long moment before I turned it. And while I sat there, I heard him say my name again, from the culvert, in his voice, twice more, and each time it was a little less like him. I drove the access road with the headlights off because I did not trust anything electrical to be as quiet as it looked. The dashboard glow bothered me. I hunched over the wheel and read the road by starlight and by the plow line, and I made 4 miles before I saw a man walking downhill in the middle of the road. Ordinary clothes, no gloves, no pack. The pace I had already learned. I stopped the truck 40 yards behind him. I sat with my hands on the wheel and waited. He did not turn. He did not react to the engine. He walked. I turned the truck off. I waited 15 minutes. When I turned it back on, he was gone. There were no tracks off the shoulder. I drove through the place where he had been, and I did not slow. A mile further down, I saw a second one, standing in the timber facing the road. Head tilted. I did not look at him. I drove past. I made the county road, and I turned toward the valley. On the county road, there are 4 porch lights I know by heart. That night, 3 were on. 1 was off. That was Rafe Kittredge's. His truck was in the driveway. His kitchen window was dark. Rafe left his porch light on every night because he could not sleep without it. I did not stop. I want to be plain about that. I did not stop because I told myself I was carrying a message, and the message was more important. That was a thing I told myself. Rafe was fine. I want to say that here so it does not sit under this recording. He had gone to bed early with a headache and forgotten the light. I went to see him 3 weeks later to apologize, and he did not know what I was apologizing for, and I did not explain. I sat at his table and drank his coffee and let him talk about a dog he was thinking of getting, and I left. I have not been back. That was cowardice. Not the driving past, the not going back. I want that on the record. The sheriff's office at 9:40 at night is a low brick building with 2 flags and a plow-scraped parking lot, and a door that sticks in cold weather. I stood in the parking lot for a minute before I went in, because I was going to have to tell a woman I did not know a set of things that were true, and that were going to sound like the things a person says when he has come off a mountain with something in his blood, and I needed her to believe me in the first 5 minutes, or none of it was going to matter. I decided, standing there, to tell it flat. No emotion, no adjectives, route, times, names, objects. I was going to sit down when she told me to sit down, and I was going to answer whatever she asked in the same flat voice. And I was going to trust that a deputy in a small county at the foot of a range where strange things happen from time to time would recognize the tone of a man who was not embellishing. That is what I did. And she believed me, or she believed me enough. She did not write anything down while I was talking. Her hands were flat on the counter. Her jaw was set. Her eyes did not leave my face. I have thought since that she was memorizing an account word for word because she was not sure the recorder she would have to file later would be enough. Her name was Vesa Ilkin. She had come to the county from further north 2 years back and had a reputation among the district hands for being humorless and thorough. I owe her something I cannot pay her. She got on her own radio on the county band, and she called her sergeant, and her sergeant was a man named Halden Voss, whom I did know a little from a rescue 2 winters earlier, where he had been the ground contact and I had been on the hill. Halden arrived within 8 minutes. He came in through the front door of the office with snow on his boots and his hat in his hand, and he looked at me, and he looked at Vesa, and he said, "How bad?" "Bad," she said. "How much of it do we act on tonight?" "All of it." He did not argue. He asked me 3 questions. The first was whether the 3 transmitters I had named were the only 3. And I said I thought so, but they should ask the power company and the phone company and the cell provider what else was on the ridge that I did not know about. The second was whether there was anyone else on the mountain besides Tovar and Inez. I said I did not know. I told him about the shapes and the bare tracks and the man in the middle of the access road and the one standing in the timber. And I told him there might be more of them in the timber still. The third question was whether I had touched the metal box in the chamber. I said no. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he nodded, and he said, "Good." And I did not ask him why he had asked, and he did not tell me. I have wondered since. He has died since. I will get to that too. The power company was harder than the sheriff. The person on the other end wanted a work order and a chain of authorization and a written request. And Vesa said the words, "County emergency," 3 times, and then handed the phone to Halden. And Halden said the words, "I will drive to your dispatch center in 20 minutes, and I will pull the breakers myself if you do not do it in the next 10. And the person on the other end pulled the breakers in the next 10. The repeater on the shoulder went dark at 11:14. The buried line to the station went dark at 11:22. The cell tower on the highway pass went dark at 11:41. I sat on a plastic chair in the sheriff's office lobby for those 3 hours. And at 12:20 in the morning, a man came in whom I need to talk about, even though I would rather not. His name was Corbin Weld. He was the district's public information officer, a route setter once, a long time ago, before 2 knee surgeries put him behind a desk. He was competent at his job, and I had never particularly liked him. And I had never had a reason to say so before that night. He came in wearing a coat over a button-down shirt, and he looked at me on the plastic chair and he said, "Bern, are you all right?" "No." "Come outside with me. Let us talk before you say anything else in here." "I have already said it." "Come outside anyway." I looked at Vesa. She was at her counter. She had heard him. She did not look up from the form she was filling out. She was giving me a choice she did not want to make for me. I stayed in the chair. "I have already said it, Corbin," I said. "Anything you want to hear, you can hear from the record." He sat down on the plastic chair beside mine. He leaned forward with his hands on his knees. His voice went lower. "Bern, the district has protocols for events on the range. Those protocols exist to protect the district and to protect the people the district serves. When you go to the sheriff before you go to the district, you break those protocols. That is a problem for me. It should be a problem for you." I was very tired. My knee was going to be a week off my feet, minimum. There was still blood in my sock from something on the couloir I did not remember. I looked at Corbin, and I felt a small, mean thing move in my chest. The kind of thing you feel toward a man who is asking you to be reasonable at the wrong hour. "Corbin," I said, "there is a hole on a ridge. There is a woman dead in it. There is a man dead in a culvert on the fire road." And he said my name after he was dead. "There are 11 bodies on the ridge that were people 3 hours ago. There are more of them in the timber along the access road. There is a pulse that rides the low bands and does something to people. And the power company just took 3 transmitters down at the request of the sheriff. Tell me which of those things the district's protocols were going to protect anyone from if I had called you first." He looked at me the way a man looks at another man when he has just realized the conversation he had planned to have is not the conversation he is going to be able to have. He straightened up. "All right, Bern. All right. We will do this your way tonight. In the morning, we are going to sit down, you and I and a lawyer the district provides. And we are going to go over your statement to the sheriff. And we are going to see what needs to be adjusted. Adjusted. Refined. I do not want the lawyer the district provides. If I want a lawyer, I will find my own. Anything you want to say to me tomorrow, you say in front of Vesa or in front of Halden, not in a room with your lawyer and a recorder." He put his hand on my shoulder briefly, the way a man does when he wants a witness to see he was gentle. And he went out through the sticking door into the parking lot. Vesa did not look up. That was as much support as she could give me from behind that counter. And I took it, and I rang her on an ascena, and I have not forgotten it. Corbin was reassigned within a month. Not fired, reassigned. He is public information officer for a district 3 states east now. I do not think about him often. I did not like him. That is the whole of what I have to say about him. The state team came in 3 days later. 4 of them. 2 from state emergency management. 1 from a federal agency with a card that had only a phone number. The 4th was a woman in her 60s, in a cardigan and reading glasses, who took her notes by hand in a small leather notebook. and never once looked at the recorder on the table. Her name, she said, was Marlo Enescu. She asked most of the questions. I told them about the colonel. I told them about the huts. I did not tell them about the torn notebook page or the 2 words. I want to say why. It was not principle. It was not evidence tampering as a plan. It was that I did not want a woman with a leather notebook to take the physical notebook away in a box. And I did not want the 2 words in the hand I did not know to end up on a hard drive in a room I could not see. That was as much reason as I had. It was not a good one. I'm not going to pretend it was. I told them about the station. I told them about the voice at the door. I told them about the ridge. I told them about the chamber and Inez and the plate. I told them about Tovar and the culvert and about him saying my name. I told them about the walking man in the road and the standing one in the timber. I told them about Rafe's porch light being off, though I did not say why that mattered to me. Marlo wrote things down. The other 3 watched. At the end of the 3rd day of interviews, Marlo Enescu asked me a question. She asked, "Mr. Aldana, in your judgment, was the object in the chamber alive?" I said, "I do not know." "Guess." "I do not want to guess." "Guess anyway." I said, "It behaved like a thing that was doing something on purpose. It behaved like a thing that had a way of using people. I do not know if that is alive. I do not know if what I saw was the thing itself or a fingerprint the thing was making with its outside. The box was cold when they opened it later, or so I have been told. And the ridge is empty now, or so I have been told. And my partner is dead. And if the box was doing what it was doing on purpose, then whoever it was doing it for is either satisfied or waiting." She wrote in her notebook. She did not look up. "Waiting," she said. "Waiting. Thank you, Mr. Aldana." She has called me twice since, the first time to ask if I had experienced any medical symptoms. I said no. She said good and thank you and hung up. The second time to ask if I had heard anything unusual in the wind at night. I paused before I answered. She heard the pause. She said, "That is enough of an answer. Thank you, Mr. Aldana," and hung up. I do not know what she is. I do not know what agency she works for. I know she is the only person in that chain of interviews who wrote things down by hand, while 3 other men let the recorder do it. And I know that is the reason I trust her more than I trust the rest of them combined. And I know that is not much of a reason. Inez was not alive when they got her out. They told me later she had been dead maybe 6 hours by the time the team lifted the plate. They could not tell me exactly. They could tell me that when they lifted her hands off the floor of the chamber, there was no change in any instrument they had brought with them. And they could tell me that the box was cold and empty except for a fine gray dust when they eventually pried it open in a facility I have never been allowed to see. Inez had a sister 3 states east. The sister came to the valley, and I sat with her in a diner. And I told her what her sister had said to me in the chamber. And I told her about the pleas. She cried, and then she stopped, and then she said thank you. Her brother Halvard was one of the 11 on the ridge. She did not know that when she came to me. I told her. I did not have to. I did anyway. That is another thing I did that was not clean. I told a woman 2 of her family members were dead on the same mountain, and I told her in a booth in a diner because I could not carry it alone. She thanked me for that too. I did not deserve either thank you. I took both. Halden Voss died in April, in his home, A stroke, they said. He was 61, no history. His widow wrote me a note a month after I sent a card, saying Haldan had spoken well of me and had said something in his last week about the range that she had not understood and would not put in a letter, but would tell me in person if I ever came through her county. I have not gone. I have thought about it every month for 3 years. I keep not going. I do not know if I'm afraid of what he said or afraid of finding out he did not say anything. And his widow only wrote that note to give herself a reason for me to visit. Both are possible. Both keep me at my own kitchen table. I quit the district in June. A woman named Petra Sarn had replaced Corbin. She came into my office at 7 one morning and asked me to sit down with a documentary crew that had approached the district about the events of March. I said no. She said they were respectful. I said no. She said the district thought participating in a controlled way was better than letting them make the peace without our input. I said no. Then she said, "Bern, nobody else who was up there that day is alive. Haldan Voss is dead. Vesa Ilkin transferred to the capital and will not return calls. You are the only person the district can offer." I sat there a long moment. I said, "The reason I will not talk to a camera is that whatever was on that range was capable of using low-band signal to do things to people. I do not know what it was. The state does not know what it was, or if they know, they have not told me. Until somebody I trust tells me it is safe to put my face and my voice on a recording that is going to be broadcast and streamed and archived on servers I have no control over, I'm not going to do it. And you might consider that the reason nobody else who was up there has agreed to talk on camera is not because they are shy." She said, "Bern, please." I said, "I quit, Petra." I typed a 2-paragraph resignation letter and put it on the director's desk by lunch. I cleaned out my office. I drove home. The documentary crew did the piece anyway. They got most of it roughly right. They never named the object in the chamber and never found Marlo Enescu. I did not watch it. I have not watched it. I do not intend to. I live in the valley still. A small house on the south edge of town where the last of the lights end and the fields begin. I do not own a working radio. I own a phone because a person has to own a phone. I keep it in a drawer when I am not using it. I have a stove and a chair and a bed and a porch and a knee that tells me when it is going to snow, which is more than most instruments tell you and about the same amount of what I trust. I never told anyone about the face on the ridge. I want to be plain about that. I said I would go to the sheriff and I would go to the family, and I did not. I sat in the diner with Inez's sister, and I told her about her brother because it felt clean to tell her. Then I got in my truck, and I drove home. And I did not tell anyone about the face I had seen on the west side of the gap. I do not know his name. I have not gone through the county's missing persons list, which is a thing I could have done any afternoon of any week of the 3 years since. I have not done it. If I do not know his name, I cannot go to the door. If I cannot go to the door, I do not have to. That is a coward's arithmetic. I am aware. I have not fixed it. I have thought some nights about fixing it. Some nights I get up from the chair, and I put a coat on, and I get into the truck, and I drive halfway to the sheriff's office, and then I turn around at the bridge, and I come home. There is a family in this valley who has spent 3 years thinking their person went missing in the range that spring, which is a hard thing, but a normal thing. And if I go to their door, I'm replacing a hard, normal thing with a hard, strange thing. And I'm not sure that is a service. I tell myself that. I'm not sure I believe it. I am telling you both parts, and you can decide. The wind is loud tonight. It is coming down off the range in the way it does at this season. And I'm sitting at the table in the kitchen, and I've been talking into this recorder longer than I meant to. I'm going to stop soon. Before I stop, I want to say the last thing that matters. 3 weeks ago, in the last week of February, my mother called me from her house in town. She is 79. She still lives in the house I grew up in. She said she had been going through a box of my father's things, and she had found a picture she wanted me to have. I drove over. She showed it to me at her kitchen table. It was a photograph from 1969. My father, in his mining coveralls, standing at the mouth of a shaft with 2 other men. On the back, in my father's handwriting, was a date and a location. The location was a range that no longer had an active mine. The range was mine. The range I had worked for 11 years. I had not known my father ever worked on that range. I asked my mother. She said she thought I had known. She said he had done a season there in his 20s, before the copper outfit, on a state contract that had not lasted. She said he had come home from that season and had not gone back to hard rock work for 2 years. She said he had not liked it and had not liked to talk about it, and she had assumed I'd heard about it from him at some point and had not asked because he had not liked to talk. I asked her what part of the range. She said she did not remember. She said it was up high. She said he had come home once with his feet in bad shape and had said something about walking barefoot in snow, and she had thought he was joking. I have the photograph in a drawer in the kitchen, next to the tin the drive of this recording is going into. I have not shown it to anyone. I have not called Marlo Enescu. I have not called the sheriff. I do not know what my father did on that range in 1969. And I do not know if the men in the photograph are dead or alive. And I do not know if what happened last March started 3 weeks before I got there, or 55 years before I got there. And I've decided, for now, that I'm not going to know. That is not the moral of anything. It is a thing that is true. The wind is loud. I'm going to go out on the porch in a minute, and I'm going to listen. Because that is a thing I do. And it is a thing I have been doing for 3 years. If the wind is only wind tonight, I will come inside, and I will take the drive out of this machine. And I will put it in the tin, and I will put the tin in the drawer with the phone and the photograph. If the wind is not only wind, I will still come inside, and I will still put the drive in the tin. There is no version of tonight where the drive does not go in the tin. There is no version of any night where I bring the wind inside. Whoever finds this later, if anyone does, I am not asking you to do anything with it. I'm not asking you to warn anybody. The transmitters are down. The gate is locked. The range is closed on paper for reasons the district will not put in writing. And the plate is on the hole. And I have to trust the plate. I'm asking one thing. If you take work in that country, or in any high country where the wind stops in a place it should not stop, and you feel a rhythm in your chest that is not yours, turn around. Do not tell yourself it is the repeater. Do not tell yourself you are tired. Do not notice 3 things and keep walking. Notice 1 and go home. That is what I have. That is all of it that I have. I'm going out on the porch now. The door is opening. The wind smells of high snow and of the fields and of the diesel from the road half a mile off. I will listen for as long as I need to listen. Then I will come inside, and I will put the drive in the tin, and I will sit at this table for a while. And if I sleep, I will sleep. The door is closing.